say it with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam dayan amen. We don't need to do Adonai Natan, Adonai Lachach, Yishya, Adonai Barach, the word that's given, the word that's taken away. Instead we bless the Lord, we thank God for the time that we've had today. So I'll ask you now to make prayers and opens.
Yeah, that's why we didn't have it.
Yeah. Not my strength.
How far does it have to go? Just a little bit.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
Kirachem al banim, richam Adonai al yireyav. As a parent has compassion for children, so God has compassion for us. God knows how we are fashioned. God remembers that we are but dust. But Adonai's compassion is everlasting, and God's kindness to children's children extends age after age, unchanging. We always begin this service with a series of psalms. Psalms are the oldest prayers that we have, going back to the time of the Bible. And in that way we're going to link Florence's life to 3,000 years of Jewish tradition, the people of Israel, and the eternity of God.
I lift my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? This is a question the psalmist asked thousands of years ago, perhaps at a time of sorrow like this one. And here was his answer. My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, your guardian will not slumber. For the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from harm and guard your soul. For Adonai guards you going out and coming in, now and forever. Mizmor LeDavid. Adonai roi lo echsa. Bina deshe yarbitzeni amen v'nechot yinah haleni. Nafshir shovev yanchim b'maglei tzedek l'mahan shemo. Gam kelech b'geis al-mavet lo imara ki ata imadi. Shiftecha mishantecha hemei nachlamuni. Haroch l'fanai sholcha neged sorarai. Dishanta b'Hashem roshi kosi rivaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirufuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavti b'beit Adonai le'orech yamim. Those are the Hebrew words of Psalm 23, also known as the Shepherd's Psalm, for it guides us through difficult moments like this one. If you'd like, I invite you to join me as we recite it in the English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
This past Shabbat in the synagogue, we began our reading of Torah once again with the very first portion of the book of Genesis, Bereshit. In that biblical book of beginnings, we also learn about the end of life. And there we find that at the time of the passing of the patriarchs and the matriarchs of our people, it's members of the family who come forward to speak words of memory and words of eulogy. Now, Florence has a family of biblical proportions, it seems to me. We have Lynn married to Cliff, and Debbie, Larry, Sandy married to Jeff. Their grandchildren, Daniel, Stephanie with Brian, Jessica with Chris, David with Beth, Josh, Fallon with Zachary, Alex, Leonard with Yim, Bradley, and Scott. And their great-grandchildren, Mackenzie, Lucas, Jacob, Olivia, Aaron, Ashley, and Ethan. And she's one of 3 siblings, Roberta and Edie, Zichrono Livracha. Not everybody is speaking today. But we will hear from representatives of generations. And so Sandy is going to go first, and then we're going to hear from grandchildren, from Stephanie, David, Jessica, and Scott, and I'll call you up in turn. Sandy.
I have to say it's much less intimidating with a small group. I feel like I'm just talking to my family. I'd like to thank everyone who is here today to honor our mom, Florence Tansky, whether it be in person or virtually. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about our mom as we reflect on her life, and most importantly, her impact on so many of us here today. When I was about 40, which was not that long ago, I'm just saying, my father Leo let me know in no uncertain terms that I would be responsible for taking care of Flo after he was gone. I wasn't worried about the aspect of actually caring for her, but rather the fact that Flo, she was a little bit of a spender. But actually, all of us take after my mom, more than my dad, with regard to being spenders versus savers. Nevertheless, he grinned at me and wished me the best of luck. While I did question her on the numerous QVC boxes she would receive of horrible jewelry, Flo really did cut back a great deal over the years, and her biggest joy was when my sisters or I would take her to Chico's for clothes. That was her all-time favorite, and most of all, she really loved spending time with us. There were, however, 4 key facets of Flo that I thought of when thinking about what I would say today. All of them permeated across who she was, and they stand out the most to me. The first one was Flo the connector. She could talk to anyone. While it was a bit mortifying when I was growing up, I did find it funny as she got older. She would tell the stories of her life to anyone who would listen. Most of the time they were true, but every now and then she would add a few tidbits that just didn't occur. But whoever she conversed with loved the story, and they were fully engaged in whatever was being discussed. She could connect to young and old alike, make everyone feel special and inclusive. She was inclusive to whoever we brought home. Those are the memories that people have mentioned the most over the past couple days when commenting about her via text or social media. The second one, Flo the Fixer. Flo would help anyone with whatever problem they had. When I was younger, she would send people to me to get them a job wherever I was working. Many times, she couldn't actually fix the problem herself, of course, so one of us would need to help her. In later years, I would have people call me on my cell phone with the craziest things. Your mom said you can order me one of those great rollator walkers she has. Or, your mom gave me your number to get a donation of turkeys for my business to give away. I would just shake my head, but you know, I would always do it. She would get everyone's problems addressed one way or another. The third was Flo the Achiever. My mom graduated high school at 15, and while she never went to college, she worked as a bookkeeper for many years, first for different entrepreneurs, and then for the Hebrew Academy in Washington, where she was honored as a woman with a Woman of Valor Award at her retirement. In the early years, she would be up so many nights, late at night, working in her basement office that we had in our house. She was a true team player, and they all valued her. I think watching her work ethic over the years is what inspired all four of us to follow in her footsteps with long-term careers. And let's not forget her cooking abilities. She was a great cook and a fabulous baker. Her tenacity was really evident, though, when she overcame her many health challenges. Whether it was diet changes, which she didn't find easy, or surgeries, she pushed through everything to overcome whatever she was facing. She was an unbelievably strong woman. The final facet was her views, otherwise known as her opinions. Flo had many opinions, and she was happy to share them with you, solicited or not. Whether it was about food and how she thought you should be preparing it, who was appropriate to date, how many kids you should have, or politics, which was always the tricky one. You would hear her point of view. I'm sure all of us have been on the receiving end of one of her opinions, some of them a bit more passionate than others. But she was very often right, and even though it may not have been consistent with my thoughts or choices, I agreed with her in the end. When she turned 80, she declared, as her mother Rose did, that now she could say whatever she pleased. Unfiltered Flo was surely a treat. While I am so sad to see our mom leave us, she had an unbelievable life of achievement, impact, and inspiration. She was such a large part of my life, especially the last 17 years since my dad passed. It will be so hard not having her to call on for advice and information, but I know how lucky I am to have had her all of these years. My wonderful memories of Flo, my mom, friend, and confidant, will hopefully help me overcome my sadness. We love you, Mom, and we thank you for everything you did to make us who we are today. Thank you.
Stephanie.
Okay, I'm going to try not to use my teacher voice. I don't want to ricochet off the walls here. So I don't have a speech prepared, but I do have a lot of really awesome memories of my grandmother. So visiting her in Florida, whether it be with my family or my college friends. We took the train down there. That was fun. Cooking with her. I remember receiving her special cookbook when I got married, and giving me lots and lots and lots of recipes, different ways to cook my fish, always using butter, because butter always makes it better. Always smelling her boucheron when she gave you a hug. When she moved into her apartment, coming off the elevator, could always smell her cooking. And I would ask my mom, "Is that Grandma's?" "Yes, it is." Her mandel bread. Her secret stash of Entenmann's, which my cousins and I would take. I know she said they were for Grandpa, but secretly, I think they were for us. Shopping at Bloomingdale's, getting me my very first pair of super cool overalls, and then taking me to get a Chinese chicken salad at White Flint Mall. Making blintzes, which we actually just FaceTimed her. We did with my daughter, with my mom and my aunt. Grandma was so proud. Of course, she said add lots of butter, and I'm hoping to pass that tradition on to my daughter. Going to the Hebrew Academy with Grandma, because I wasn't always such a good student, and I would spend lots of hours in her office, and I remember doing fun things with her, doing tasks, shuffling papers. And best yet, I remember standing in the bathroom with my grandmother while she was putting on her makeup, and I was asking her questions. She says, "Well, look at me, I'm 70, and I still have all my teeth." I will miss you, Grandma.
So I consider myself to be very fortunate because about 10, 11 years ago, I had an opportunity to move to South Florida for work, which gave me an opportunity to reconnect with Flo and really get 6 good years of quality time with her. So I want to kind of share some memories from that period of time because I really had an opportunity to reconnect with her. So when I moved to Florida, one of the first questions she asked me was when I was going to get married and give her grandchildren. And anytime that I would talk to her, tell her that I was going out with somebody, she goes, "Oh, when do I get to meet this person?" And there were so many times that I had to tell her, well, this person doesn't quite meet the test of being able to come meet you. And then about a year after I moved down, I met my wife Beth, and it was just such a pleasure to be able to tell her, well, I finally found somebody that you can meet. And the rest was history. And one of the things that Beth told me really impressed her about me was how much time I spent with my grandmother, helping to take care of her for just the little things that for me didn't think weren't a big deal, but for her were very important. Like trips to Costco and trying to avoid debt as a boys. She loved to cook, she loved to eat, and she loved to shop, and it seems like a lot of the time that we spent was doing one, two, or all of those things. So I'm very fortunate for the time that I got to spend with her, and when I moved back up north, one of the goals was that we were going to be able to reconnect with her, but unfortunately due to the current climate, we were unable to get that quality time with her while we were up here. I'm fortunate that she did spend some time with my daughter, not so much time with my son, but I know how happy she was to be able to spend some time with a great grandchild, and these are memories that I'll always remember and cherish.
Yes.
Dear Grandma, thank you. Thank you for the love, the hugs, the lunches, and the shopping trips. Thank you for letting me play with your pots and pans when I was 5 on your kitchen floor. Thank you for teaching me how to cook so I could feed my family all those delicious meals. I will miss you so. I know that you and Grandpa are dancing together again. I love you both. Goodbye for now. I hope to see you again. Love, Jessie.
Shmuel.
I also wrote some memories about Grandma. My Grandma Flo was the best cook around. She would make massive vats of soup for me. Her cannoli were unmatched, but she could never make it without her taste tester. My Grandma Flo had immense love to give. When she would squeeze you, all of your thoughts would escape your mind. My grandma loved to play cards and games. After hours of playing, we would realize it was 2 a.m. My grandma always beat me, but she would teach me her strategies. At her place in Florida or at Lionsgate, her little clowns always made me feel like a kid again. I would pick up my grandma for dinner, and I would play her music because anything else would get me a weird look. When we would get there, my grandma would tell all the waiters I was her cute date. She would hold my hand and say, "Tell me what's going on with you, sweetie." My Grandma Flo loved her grandchildren. When we would go just the two of us, she would whisper, "Hand me another roll." We knew my mom would yell at her if she ate another piece of bread. If I came to Lionsgate for dinner, we would sit with her friends. I told them my name was Scott. They would ask, "What do you do for work, Seth?" She would whisper to me that they can't hear anything. Grandma Flo loved pictures of her family. She had them lined up on every surface in her apartment. G and I were broken up for 6 months, but she still had a picture of her. I asked her why, and she replied, "Don't touch the picture of my Gigi." In the same breath, she would ask us all if our significant others were Jewish. Most were not, but we would say they're going to convert. I visited Grandma Flo in the hospital just 2 weeks ago with Josh. In pure Jewish guilt, she squeezed my hand hard and said, "My Scotty, I need you to hurry up and graduate. I don't want to watch you graduate from heaven." I told all the nurses that I was her date and she was the love of my life. I couldn't help but cry. I knew it was going to be my last date with my grandma, but I also knew that soon she would go on a date with her Leo. I'll always love you, Grandma. Rest easy. I'll be looking for you at my graduation and my wedding. I promise she'll convert for you.
So let me first say that to Larry, to Lynn, Debbie, and to Sandy, and Jeff and Cliff as well, that I enjoyed our conversation yesterday very much. And in that conversation about your mom, you noted that after serving for 18 years as the controller of Hebrew Academy of Greater Washington, at her retirement she was designated a woman of valor. And that recognition is, of course, based on the well-known poem from the biblical book of Proverbs, Eshet Chayil. As I thought about that in the context of all that you said about your mom, it seemed like an appropriate text for reflecting upon her life. Having heard the remarks of all who have spoken today, it seems even more fitting. Eshet Chayil is first and foremost a reflection upon a woman's role in the family, in the life of her family. Eshet Chayil mi yimtza. The literal translation of that opening phrase is a woman of valor who can find. Well, Leo and Flo found each other when she was only 16 years old. They met in the Catskills where the family was spending the summer. One day, Flo borrowed her cousin's ID, and on August 15, 1948, she and Lucille simply slipped off and got married. Then she went home to Brooklyn with her parents as usual. Their parents never found out about it until January, when a congratulations announcement was published in the Mountaindale Press, and everything became public. And that's when Flo's father moved the family to D.C. That's a great legend. The marriage worked out. Eshet Chayil Miyimsa. A more modern translation reads, a woman of valor is a precious find. And then the text goes on to say, Rachok mipninim michra. Her worth is far above rubies. Now, Flo liked jewelry, as we've already heard, and there were many years in which Leo was able to make gifts of jewelry for birthdays and anniversaries. They made a marriage of 55 years. They renewed their vows at their 40th anniversary, and the cousin who had provided Flo with that ID so she could get married was there to celebrate with them. The poem from Proverbs describes the marital relationship of a woman of valor this way. Batach ba lev bala. Her husband puts her trust in her, and she is good to him all the days of her life. Flo followed Leo to Syracuse, where he completed his undergraduate degree, and they moved to Brooklyn, where they lived in an apartment that was a converted army barracks building until there was a fire. And Flo literally had to throw Lynn out the window and then jump herself. The family then moved in with Flo's folks for a while. And then Leo got a position with the CIA, and the family moved to D.C. She became a homemaker, a wife, a mom, and she also worked as a bookkeeper from home. That meant that she was there to be the disciplinarian, as Lynn and Debbie were kids especially. She could be tough, not reluctant to give a pinch, which you called her twister, I believe. But she was always there for you. And Debbie, I think you said that your mom became your best friend as you grew into adulthood. There were daily phone calls to talk about everything from family to solving the problems of the world. And Lynn, you noted how your mom would visit you at schools where you worked and regale your colleagues with stories about things you did as a child. And when you told her that's TMI, she simply said, no big deal. Your co-workers were charmed. They found your mom warm and engaging. As adults, we come to see our parents in more mature eyes as we ourselves become parents. Now, as is often the case, the younger children have a very different experience and view of their childhood than those who came first. So, Larry, you used the word nurturing to describe your mom, and you said that you were a bit of a mama's boy. And by the time Sandy was in school, she recalls her mom being pretty much laissez-faire. And actually, I think, Sandy, you said you raised yourself. An exaggeration, of course. But part of that is because... part of that was because when Larry went to school, your mom began going to work outside the home. This meant she needed to find somebody to help with the children and the house, and that was Verna. Now, Flo needed Verna. She also knew that Verna could be more, could do more. And so she encouraged her to get an education and actually put money aside to help her with that. Verna went on to become a nurse. A woman of valor, we are told, opens her hands and her hearts to others beyond her family. But still, family is her first focus. Safya halichot beita. She tends to the affairs of her household and eats not the bread of idleness. Even when she was working, she was back home before Leo, and when he arrived, there was a full dinner, and the family ate together every night. That memory touched off a whole discussion about what a good cook and baker Flo was. For Larry, it immediately brought to mind the memory of an extensive backyard garden that Leo had, and the homegrown cabbage that she's turned into wonderful stuffed cabbage. For Sandy and Debbie, it was the blitzes. And then all of you remembered the chopped liver and the gefilte fish and the old hand grinder that attached to the table at which you all had turns to apply your hand. And Sandy says that she remembers doing it outside on a hot patio. Only years later did Flo switch to a food processor. Jeff also had a great story about gefilte fish. It was so good that he thought he might sell it at ShopRite. So he brought Flo to the store, got her all the ingredients that she required, the whitefish, the pike, eggs, matzo meal, spices, whatever goes into it, and she went to work. The product was perfect, delicious. But then they did an analysis of the cost, and it was about $25 a pound. A bit high for Jeff's clientele. So it had to remain a family delicacy, along with the sour cream coffee cake, though there was once a deli owner who also tried to convince Flo to make that for his store. Now, the not-so-secret ingredient, which has already been mentioned in many of Flo's dishes, was butter. Lots of butter. Once, when Flo was making mashed potatoes for Sandy, Sandy told her, no salt or no butter. Flo said, okay. And then, to Jeff, who was watching, she said, I'll just use a bit. 2 sticks of butter went in. And some cream as well. Couldn't stop her. Also couldn't stop her from eating certain foods raw, like hamburger or the fish, which she tasted while preparing. Another favorite was simply bread and butter. Lots of butter. In later years, Sandy tried to limit that with not much success, and also not much success in limiting the Diet Cokes, especially with Jeff sneaking her cans in. Then Larry, you defended your mom. You said, well, food is love. And clearly, for Flo, it was. She loved food, and she loved feeding those she loved. The grandchildren all attest to this, and there was more. Larry noted that as a kid, whenever one of your friends was over to play ball in the backyard, they would always be invited to stay for dinner. And all of you recall that friends were always welcome at your home. As you became adults, your friends also found your mom warm and interesting to be around. That's why the news of her passing has brought you so many texts and emails from many friends who appreciated the way she touched them when you were all young, and friends that you made as adults as well. Back to Eshet Chaim. Piha patcha b'chachma. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Flo never hesitated to share her opinions, and you all knew it. So did the grandchildren. There was advice, as you said, about school and dating and food, and lots to say about politics. She was a liberal Democrat, and she didn't hide how she felt about issues or elected officials. Lynn, I think it was you who said that you were taking her out to dinner when Obama was running. It was Larry. Aha, the fingers are pointing. And she would only go to a place that has a TV so that she could watch the returns.
Oh, that was Sandy.
Okay, we'll figure out who said it later. It was hard to take notes as you were all talking. You know, the Zoom, when one person starts, it cuts the other person off. Debbie, I think it was you who said that your mom and dad, you could recall having some very, and the word you used was brisk conversations about politics and views on which they didn't necessarily agree. Larry, you also had some differences. She could get into it with her friends as well. She and Bernice would occasionally have a dispute, not necessarily politics, but some difference of opinion, and Flo would stop speaking to Bernice. But then Bernice would come over and say she was going to lie down in the street in traffic if Flo didn't talk to her. Flo would, of course, relent, and their friendship lasted through the years, even after the move to Florida. There were other long-lasting friendships as well. The couples in the bridge group who would get together regularly for a game and for dinner. The Mahjong group with whom Flo played for something like 30 years. One set of friends actually flew to London to surprise Leo and Flo, who were visiting there. Flo and Leo had a good social life. They enjoyed travel: London, Switzerland, Germany, Israel, Caribbean cruises, trips to Jamaica, where Leo did some teaching. When Leo passed away in December of 2003, it was, of course, very difficult for Flo. And I remember how sad she was at that Shiva in Florida. But you all rallied around her, and she rallied in response. And there were many more good years to enjoy the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. There were bar mitzvahs and graduations and holidays, and there were many meals shared, and lots of phone calls. Continuing occasions for Flo to give advice, render opinions, and talk politics, in which she remained interested right up to her last days. So now let me close with some of the concluding words of Eshet Chayil. Kamu baneha v'yashruha. Her children, and we can add grandchildren and great-grandchildren, come forward and bless her. Rabot banot asu chayil va'at alit al kulana. Many have done well, but you surpassed them all. Her memory will surely be a blessing. We rise for final prayer.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the soul of Florence Tansky who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful one, we ask our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated.
So we know that the burial will be taking place in Florida, and that will, of course, mean a delay before we can really begin Shiva. Kaddish begins at the conclusion of the burial. There will be a Shiva Zoom for everybody, in which all can participate and tune in on Sunday evening. That will be following the service, the 8 o'clock service, on the regular TBS Zoom service. And then you'll be able to stay on and share memories with others and reflections as well.
We can all rise once more.
Please.
experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to tear down and a time to build up. Time to weep and a time to laugh, time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather, a time to embrace and a time to refrain. A time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to let go, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak.
You take it home. He just wandered somewhere off.